You are listening to Dolly, a story in the B.L. Norris Dolly Nightmare Doll universe. All rights reserved. Prologue. The screams coming from Vera Jones's bungalow would have been terrifying to hear if there had been anyone nearby. There wasn't. Only the porcelain-faced collection of dolls stood idle in their glass cases as their owner desperately crawled up the stairs. One hand, 1 foot at a time. Her breath came in forceful, labored gasps. Even as the fight in her body was waning, her fear was intensifying. It was a fear so profound it felt as though her very organs were trying to escape her. Vera crawled up the stairs, each step a struggle. Then she heard a sound, squishy and wet, that an hour ago had been foreign, but now was all too familiar. The flickering bulb from the overturned lamp seemed almost afraid to be near the source of her terror. She felt a cold sensation latch onto her ankles, the gelatinous texture inching its way upward, with no hurry because it had already won. Poor Vera lost the ability to move as the thing roamed up her body. It left a residue of toxins that seeped through her skin and into her bloodstream, a venom that immobilized her cells. "Ah!" Vera cried out as the sensation reached the nape of her neck, sending shivers down her spine. "No, no!" she cried as it worked its way through her hair and traveled over her scalp, ultimately reaching her earlobe. Vera trembled as the sensation slipped into her ear canal. Now she could hear the sloshing and slithering up close, like a nightmare come to life. "I am Vera Jones. I am Vera Jones." She repeated the words as her mind struggled to stay clear. Light exploded into her consciousness, and then everything went dark. There was nothing but the slow beat of her heart and the unsettling sound of her fate. One. A serial killer? Detective Jessup wondered aloud as uniformed officers and hardened detectives packed into Vera Jones's cottage, eager to see what remained of the reclusive matron. No killer could do that, Jessup muttered to himself. "It would have to be the most creative serial killer I've ever seen," Jared Post said. "You're a traffic cop," Jessup said, suppressing a smile. "Let me see," Jared said, elbowing his way in for a glance. Jared was the police chief's son. Despite his limited experience, his position allowed him to be present at significant scenes. Jared's face went pale at the sight of the bones and skull neatly arranged on the bed. Nearby was a small pouch made from human skin, its unsettling appearance heightening the scene's grotesque nature. 2. "You had to see it, Sheila," Jared Post said, waving his hands as he recounted the scene to his girlfriend Sheila Bronson. "Jared, please. I don't want to hear about that," Sheila said, unnerved by his excitement over disturbing cases. She glanced at the man lying on her bed in socked feet, watching reruns of Tom and Jerry, the same man she would be fucking later. "Can you get me a beer, babe?" he asked. Sheila forced a smile. "Sure, babe." She descended the stairs on her errand when she heard the footsteps behind her. "Where do you think you're going?" Sheila asked. "Mom!" Darla exclaimed, rolling her eyes. "No, Darla, it's too dangerous. Jared just told me they found Vera Jones dead in her cottage." Darla stomped her feet. "Matt will protect me." Sheila snorted. The thought of Darla's boyfriend protecting anyone but himself was laughable. "No, back upstairs. If you want to see Matt, FaceTime him." "Oh, all right," Darla huffed, returning to her room. Sheila chuckled as she sipped the beer she'd gotten for Jared. An hour later, she peeked into Darla's bedroom, her heart melting listening to her daughter's soft snoring. She closed the door gently and went into her bedroom. Jared was snoring loudly. It seemed the night might turn out well after all. 3. Laughter filled the air as teenagers gathered, sipping beer and roasting marshmallows around a bonfire. "Ever notice that snowflakes fall and embers fly?" Matt asked. "Makes me wonder if heaven isn't hot and hell is cold. Maybe we have it backwards." He looked around for agreement and found none. The group erupted in laughter. "What? All things are possible," Matt said, gulping his beer. Darla smiled. Matt was dumb as a box of rocks, but he was the sexiest boy in school. Plus, his family was loaded. Her family was from the wrong side of the tracks, and her looks was her best shot of rising from the working class. For better or for worse, she was hitching her wagon to Matt. "I love you," she said, looking up at him. He smiled and kissed the top of her head. "How did you sneak out of the house, Darla?" her friend Tamika asked. "I looped a snoring sound effect on my iPad and sneaked out the window," Darla replied with a grin. Her friends congratulated her on her cunning. "Your mom is so strict," Tamika said. "Yeah, she's a dictator," Matt agreed. They partied for another hour before Darla and Matt climbed into his candy apple red Trans Am. "Oh, she's so pretty," Darla exclaimed, picking up the doll from the floorboard. The doll was striking in a peculiar way, with long white hair and deep blue eyes. Darla, who loved dolls, marveled at its craftsmanship. "Oh, Matt, you shouldn't have," she said, leaning over to kiss him. Matt frowned at the doll, then smiled. "Darla, I know things have been rocky between us. I wanted to do something to make you happy." He grinned, and Darla rewarded him right there on the spot. When they were finished, Darla leaped out of the car, holding the doll close. Matt drove away, he wondering who had placed the doll in his car. 4. "Heard you coming from a mile away," Jared whispered from the kitchen. He was sitting at the table, loudly munching a ham sandwich and drinking milk straight from the carton with the lights off. "Are you going to tell Mom?" Darla asked. "Nope," Jared replied. "Not unless there becomes a reason to." The next morning, Sheila opened Darla's room and grimaced at the mess. As a neat freak, she found her daughter's room unacceptable. "Darla, please clean up this room." "Mom, please," Darla groaned, waking up reluctantly. Sometimes she felt like she was living in a comfortable prison. She sat up in bed and reached for her new doll. It was a beautiful. Darla wondered who had made it. She smiled as she ran her fingers over its delicate features, feeling a strange sense of peace. "Darla!" Sheila yelled up the stairs. "Okay, Mom!" Darla called back, reluctantly setting the doll down. Red dirt flew as Detective Jessup drove down the rural road of Straggler's Yard. The area, once an old mill, had become a hub for shady dealings and a dumping ground for bodies. Jessup exited the car, clutching a cup of steaming coffee. "Another one," an officer said, guiding him to the scene. "Maybe a wild animal." Jessup frowned. "I don't know of any animal that skins its victims clean and arranges their bones so intricately." Jessup bent down to examine the bones. They were bleached white, with a thatch sparse hair still clinging to the skull, arranged in a disturbing display. There wasn't a smell of decay, which Jessup found odd. He noticed a clear, gelatinous substance clinging to the nearby tree bark. It looked like tree sap. He had to do a double take because he thought the substance had moved. "They've found another one," Jared yelled. "5. Matt Jones watched with a stone face as his aunt was lowered into the ground. The police said she was the latest victim of the Stragglersville slayer. The newspapers had given the killer this name, stirring fear and boosting sales. Rich old Aunt Vera, now nothing but bones. Matt's mind turned to the family gossip about her wealth. Gold, silver, and those dolls that were worth a fortune. "My condolences," an older woman said, patting his arm. Matt flinched, but managed a polite smile. He hated being touched unless it was by a pretty girl. "Matt," his mother called, gesturing to him. "Make sure to head to the house for the reception," she said. Matt nodded, but as he left the gravesite, he headed for the cottage in the woods, Vera's cottage. There was treasure to be found. "Get away from the evidence!" Jessup called out to Jared, who was crouched examining the sap-like substance. Jared turned to him, holding a stick with some of the goo on it. "What is this?" "I don't know," Jessup said. Jared poked at the substance with the stick. "Don't touch it," Jessup said. Jared stood slowly, smoothing the wrinkles from his uniform. Creepy-looking shit. "Hey, are you okay?" Jessup asked. "Yeah, why?" "You look queasy." "I'm fine," Jared said, turning to walk away. "I got to get going. Those traffic tickets aren't going to write themselves." Jessup grabbed his arm. "You're bleeding." It was true. A trickle of blood was leaking from his ear. "I cut myself shaving," Jared said, jerking his arm away and practically ran to his patrol car. Jessup watched as Jared drove off. 6. The Trans Am crawled up the unpaved road leading to the lush green surroundings of the picturesque cottage that belonged to, or had belonged to, Aunt Vera. Matt emerged from the car and stood listening to the sound of nature. The serene environment took on an eerie taint with the knowledge of what occurred inside of the tiny, gray, box-style house. He could hear the creek bubbling in the distance, hidden away in the cavernous wall of trees. Deer peeked from the foliage before disappearing into the rustic backdrop. Prime real estate, Matt muttered to himself. He didn't understand Aunt Vera. All of that money just to spend her life hidden away among a bunch of fucking trees in a little house with terrible plumbing. It was sad Aunt Vera had died, he guessed, but his inheritance was going to be epic. He closed the car door and made his way to the porch. A fury-curling kudzu encircled the railing. Matt wrenched his hand away, disturbed by the odd texture of the plant. Yellow police tape crisscrossed the front door, so Matt circled around back. He pried a window open. He struggled with it until finally, a piece of wood broke away, and the pane shattered. Matt took off his jacket and smashed away the remaining glass. He glanced around before heaving himself off the ground and through the window, landing inside of his aunt's sitting room. He hadn't been in the room since he was a boy, and it was just as he remembered. Furniture covered in plastic and the plastic covered in a layer of dust. Tiny figurines with creepy painted faces and eyes which seemed omniscient. And then there were the dolls. Matt had always been terrified of those fucking dolls, and Vera had an army of them. Rows and rows of dolls of every kind. Big dolls, little dolls, baby dolls, little princess dolls, dolls that cried or peed or vomited. Matt noticed a 33-inch doll encased in a glass case. It was a beautiful doll with long flowing auburn tresses. Her emerald eyes sparkled. There was a neatly typed label on the top of the glass that read, "Do not touch." Matt grinned. Well, there wasn't anyone around to stop him, were there? He opened the cabinet and grabbed the glass case. He held the case in his hands, fingering the glass. It was absolutely beautiful, not like the other creepy shits. He remembered how happy Darla had been when she'd found that ugly doll. For a second, he thought about giving the doll to his girlfriend. After all, she liked dumb things like dolls and stuffed animals. He'd be swimming in pussy until graduation. No, he smiled at the doll. I bet you are worth a fucking fortune. He whipped out his iPhone and logged into his eBay account to look up the doll. It was a rare antique Steiner doll with bisque hands. Matt didn't care about any of that. What stuck out to him was the $6,000 price. Oh, baby, I'm about to make bank off of you. He was getting a hard-on just thinking about the money. You're an expensive little bitch, aren't you? The sound of running feet startled Matt, causing him to drop the case. The glass shattered into a million pieces, along with the doll's porcelain hands. Rage ballooned inside of him at the sight of his fortune glittering on the floor. "Come out, here now!" Matt commanded, picking up a fire poker. "Okay, if you want to play, we'll play!" He advanced further into the house with the poker held tightly in his hands at the ready. Despite walking softly, the creaky old floor told of his every step. A chair scraped against the kitchen floor, and Matt raced into the kitchen, ready for a confrontation, but the kitchen was empty, everything neatly in its place. Sweat had broken out on his forehead. His grip tightened on the poker. Movement flashed in his peripheral view. Damn it! Someone was fucking with him. More important, Matt thought, someone was trying to steal his fortune. He worked his way back into the living room. Matt could hear the throbbing of his heart drumming in his ears. A crash came from upstairs, and he ran up the stairs 2 at a time. There was nowhere to go now. Whoever was in here was cornered. He stood in the middle of his aunt's bedroom. The scent of mothballs and his Vera's favorite perfume permeated the room. But there was something else, too. Something organic. Earthy. There were muddy footprints that went from the entrance of the door and stopping at the bed. Matt smiled, lowering himself to his knees and looking under the bed. There was nothing, except one of his aunt's dumb dolls. Matt reached under the bed and grabbed it. It was the ugliest doll he'd ever seen. Unlike the other dolls, this one was weird. A net of cobwebs covered its vibrant green-streaked yellow hair. Its face was lemon yellow, and the eyes were lime-colored and huge, almost bulging with big black pupils, which gave it a wall-eyed appearance. The mouth was stretched in a ghoulish grin, exposing rows of teeth that matched the eyes. Matt frowned at the doll, and then he heard the footsteps again, this time from behind. He looked over his shoulder, but again no one was there. Then he felt a sharp prick on his thumb. He glanced down to see the doll's animated face. It was scowling. It opened its mouth and bit his thumb again. "Ouch! The fuck!" Matt screamed, throwing the doll against the wall. Blood was pouring from his hand, painting his palm, but there was something mixed in with it, a clear, gooey substance that gave the blood a peculiar thickness. Matt frantically tried to scrape it off, but the coating only grew thicker. It bubbled, rolling up his hand, then his elbow, and further, still up to his shoulder. It was on a mission towards his ear, where it plunged inside.